This is Edward Segal. Welcome to the Crisis Ahead podcast. Each week, we look at how companies, organizations, and individuals in the news are responding to, managing, or recovering from a crisis, and what you can learn from their successes or failures. My observations and recommendations are based on my experience managing crisis situations and advising others on how to respond to and bounce back from disasters, scandals, and other emergencies. My guest this week is Christine Andrukonis, founder and senior partner of Notion Consulting, who will be with me shortly to discuss how one of their clients, Otsuka Pharmaceutical, was proactive in responding to the pandemic. But first, I want to talk about how some people and organizations refuse to accept responsibility for their role in creating a crisis. We've seen too many examples of companies and individuals who think that playing the blame game is a winning strategy when responding to scandals or emergencies. For example, in 2019, Boeing said that the crash of two of its planes was caused by the pilots. The pilots who were killed in the crashes could not defend themselves. Investigations later found that a series of failures, including the design of the planes, software problems, and poor training, led to the tragedies. Companies, organizations, and individuals who find that they have become scapegoats in a crisis need to respond immediately, fight back, and defend themselves. Otherwise, people will assume that the blame is justified. In the political arena, former Vice President Joe Biden recently fought back against charges by President Trump that he, Biden, was responsible for the recent violence in some American cities. As Eugene Robinson, a Pulitzer Prize-winning columnist for the Washington Post, observed, the violence was happening under Donald Trump's administrations, not Joe Biden's. I've written a new book that provides important and detailed advice on how you can prevent, manage, and recover from more than 100 kinds of crisis situations, including getting blamed for a crisis you did not create. Crisis Ahead: 101 Ways to Prepare for and Bounce Back from Disasters, Scandals, and Other Emergencies. It is now available as a paperback book wherever books are sold and as an ebook from Amazon and Barnes & Noble. The book is filled with case studies about how companies and public figures have prepared for and handled crisis situations, and the important lessons you can learn from their successes and failures. Crisis Ahead also includes checklists and exercises to help you get ready for and react to a crisis. You can learn more about the book at publicrelations.com. It's not too early to start preparing for the next crisis. That's because history shows there is always a next crisis, and the sooner you are ready for it, the better. My guest this week is Christine Andrukonis, who has been helping executives change behavior for nearly 20 years. Christine has broad expertise that spans leadership, talent, change management, training, strategy, and communications. 5 years ago, she founded Notion Consulting, a global change leadership consultancy that helps leaders tackle their most complex business challenges. Christine has worked with companies across a variety of industries, including FedEx, the Estee Lauder Companies, Goldman Sachs, J.P. Morgan Chase, the NFL, and Pfizer. Thanks for joining me this week, Christine.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Some companies move much faster than others in reacting to the pandemic. You work closely with Otsuka Pharmaceutical in Japan, which was proactive in responding to this international public health emergency. What did your client do, and why and how did they do it?
Sure, yeah, that's true. We've been doing some work with Otsuka Pharmaceuticals over the last year or so, and essentially they headed into 2020, as did many organizations, fully focused on growth and building long-term sustainability for their business. They were working on a number of transformation initiatives, many of which we were helping with. And as we got into the year and the COVID-19 pandemic started to hit various countries around the world, it really pushed them on their business and how do they react to a global pandemic. And one of the things that we found in working with their North American operation, headquartered out of Princeton, New Jersey, was what they did really well was to be agile and present as leaders with their teams. So as they experienced the pandemic, which impacted their Asian operations first, they captured some of the lessons learned and best practices from their Asian operations and rapidly implemented them in the facilities in North America. So they learned how to keep their employees safe, what types of sanitary and other safety precautions to put in place, and they put them in place ahead of most of our other clients because they understood what worked. So that's the first thing that they did. And then the second thing that they did as they put those into place was they engaged their people really quickly. So their leaders got out in front of the messages and in front of the crisis with their employees, with the managers, and with their full population to make sure that they were all able to pivot and quickly change how they were working to maintain business continuity in the face of the pandemic.
Is this something the company did voluntarily, or did they need encouragement to do the right thing?
They had a proactive attitude. They were, really among many of our clients, the first to move and the most rigorous in the moves that they made, policy-wise, process-wise, and with their people as well. And they were decisive and quick to act, consistent in how they acted, and as a result were able to really maintain their business in the way that they needed to at this time of significant disruption.
What do you think was the most challenging or difficult aspect of what they did?
Yeah, I think, it's just getting their people behind where they're headed. So often companies, when they're faced with crisis, are really focused on the external messaging and how they're handling it in the public and in the media. Leaders often are so focused on fighting the fires that it's hard to stop and make time to talk to the people inside the organization. But they really did that, which is difficult. Pause, think, and be present with the people around you, even when you're in crisis and you're not sure what to expect next. And so to be able to quickly gather their executive team, get them out in front of their employee population, talking about what was a certainty, talking about what was an uncertainty, and be able to tackle employees' questions and concerns quickly was a difficult challenge, but one that they were able to do with great speed and efficiency.
Well, it sounds like they could serve as a role model for other companies around the world in how to respond to a crisis. What are the key takeaways and best practices that you saw in this situation?
Yeah, I would say, of course, people need to act quickly. But one of the things that we found, and we like to say with our clients, is go slow to go fast. Sometimes it's beneficial to pause, get the right people around the table, have a thorough conversation and plan, and then start taking action. So that's one of the best practices and takeaways that I would say is go slow to go fast, pause, and be thoughtful. The second is engage your leaders with the confidence to get in front of people, even when they feel that they're in time of crisis or have some uncertainty about what's going around them. So that second one is engage the leaders and go out. And the second thing I like to say is TTYP, talk to your people, be present and be available with them during those times. And then the third thing that I would say is just support your leaders in doing that. It's even the most sophisticated executives have a sense of uneasiness to get in front of people, especially their employees during a time of crisis and great uncertainty, and say, I don't know what to expect. Here's what I do know. I don't know the answer to everything, but I do know the answer to these some things. So they need to equip their leaders to be able to go out and do that, and provide their employees with a sense of calm and stability when things are feeling like a crisis around them.
Why did this approach work for them?
Yeah, their head of HR in North America, Angela Cologne Mahoney, understood what it would take to do this. So what she was able to do is say, we need to get our leaders out front. We need to have them talking to their people. We need to have them answering questions where they can and being transparent about where they can't answer questions. And it takes a little bit of planning. So what made that work was she was able to pull them together. She got the entire executive team involved in the process. They all hosted what we called leader chats with their people. So they got virtual meetings on the calendar, invited employees to join them, and she adequately prepared them to share where the company was going and what it was doing to manage the crisis, share where there were open questions and challenges that the leadership team was working through, help employees understand what this crisis would need for them in their day-to-day jobs, and answer the questions that they needed to answer. And that takes some preparation. It takes some coaching for the executive team. It takes some planning with the executive team. And she was able to adequately prepare them and engage them to go out and do this comprehensively.
Well, obviously, leadership is important in any crisis. Did the leadership team receive any crisis management training before this crisis?
Yeah, so they had advanced training, and then they did in the moment training as well. So we were able to pull them together in small groups and help prepare them to address the crisis, prepare them to field the questions and answers, and prepare them with the confidence needed to lead this with a sense of calm and focus. So many of them had previous training, but they needed that in the moment coaching and training refresh as well.
Was there a crisis management plan already in place, and was it sufficient to meet this particular crisis?
There was a plan in place. It was tailored, for the region, and then the plan specific to how they managed it with this specific challenge needed to be tailored accordingly. They also found that they did a good job as they went through this crisis and managed it at pausing at key moments to reflect on what's working, what's not working, and build their lessons learned into future crises. So when we got through, the initial reaction and crisis management of the COVID-19 pandemic and the racial unrest within the United States, at least, became visible among employees, they were able to employ some of the same practices with how they addressed some of the concerns about racism and equity within the United States and within the workplace with their employees.
Were there any important lessons that were learned from responding to the pandemic that were used to respond to the aftermath of the murder of George Floyd?
Yeah, and I think that they built some confidence in how they managed the COVID-19 crisis that applied as well. So the same thought process of, go slow to go fast, TTYP, or talk to your people, and equip your managers to rally the troops, they applied with the killing of George Floyd. So as employees were concerned about their safety and their family's safety as Black and brown people in the United States, or when their colleagues were concerned about whether their workplace was providing the type of just and equitable environment where all people could succeed, the company was able to, again, assemble leaders to think about their plans to address this challenge. Again, they used the same techniques of bringing people together to have honest, open, and constructive conversations. And again, equipping leaders as well to lead in this increasingly inclusive and just type of work environment. In parallel, they also continue to look at their policies and their strategy for longer term culture shift within the organization, which is an important component of managing to a crisis such that you prevent it from disrupting your business in the future.
Have you seen other companies tackle crisis situations like these using similar best practices?
Yeah, I would say that I've seen numerous companies from across industries, whether it's financial services or sports and entertainment, pharmaceutical, healthcare companies, tackle crises over time. And what I would say is the ones who do it best are able to enlist the support of their people quickly and early, such that everyone in the company is working together to address the crisis and prevent it from disrupting the business, instead of spending their time and energy in a panic, churning through anxiety. So, for example, we've had clients who also faced challenges in light of social injustice and were able to get their executive team visible and vocal in front of their people quickly, and get their employees and their leaders out talking to people as well. So that really is the key, is getting out and having conversations, coaching people and engaging them in an honest, authentic conversation in order to keep them productive and supportive.
Of course, it can be much easier said than done to do the right thing in a crisis. What are the risks for companies and organizations if they don't do the right thing?
Yeah, a couple of the risks are, one, you've got people who kind of get left aside, might not understand the risk of not managing the crisis, might not understand the crisis management strategy that the company is taking, and therefore their behavior and actions might be either not in support of what the company is doing or undermining where the company is going. So the risk is you don't have everyone doing the right thing. You've got stragglers out there undermining your efforts. And then the second risk is just productivity. The more time people are spending worrying, panicking, making it more of a crisis instead of addressing it with confidence and moving on, the more time is wasted with productivity, and the more likely you are to disrupt your business and the success of your business.
What advice do you have for companies about when and how to do the right thing?
They have to think in three levels, right? They need to change. They need to engage at the company level, at the leader level, and at the employee level. So companies need to look at their policies and practices that need to change in order to prevent and or address the crisis more quickly. They need to look at how their leaders are leading and how equipped they are to manage with a sense of calm and confidence during a time of crisis. And they need to look at how they're engaging their employees. So very tactically, they need to do a review of the crisis at those three levels and make some shifts.
Are these guidelines written in stone? What are the chances that they may change over time?
Those three, to intervene at the level of company, leader, and employees, are written in stone. And I don't write a lot of things in stone. However, how one does that will evolve and change over time, and the pace at which one does that will evolve and change over time. So those are three, I would say, persevering principles, but the tactical approach to doing each of those things will likely change as business changes.
Well, I'm afraid we're almost out of time today. How can people learn more about your company and its services?
Checking us out on our website at www.notionconsulting.com, or following us on LinkedIn or Twitter. We're always out trying to share lessons learned, best practices, and connect people across companies who are having similar challenges. So happy to engage.
My guest today has been Christine Andrukonis of Notion Consulting. Thanks for being my guest this week, Christine.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for joining me for this episode of the Crisis Ahead podcast. Remember, it's not a matter of if companies and organizations will have a crisis, but when.